Welcome to Their Mastery. I'm your host, Galina, and today we're diving into the world of a creative entrepreneur, Preston Stahly, a New York City-based photographer, composer, and producer. When I first met Preston, I knew him only as a talented New York City photographer. Once I got to know him, I learned about his other accomplishments and I was truly impressed. And then when I learned about his festival that he decided to start many years ago, I thought that I gotta have him on the podcast. I gotta invite him and talk about it. My hope is to inspire other creative entrepreneurs to make daring moves and make it happen. Preston, it's really great to see you. Thank you for joining me.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you for having me.
thank you so much. Could you please tell our listeners about the music festival that you started? Is it 24 years ago?
Yeah, back in 2000, I would say we're pushing 25 now, clearly.
That's a big anniversary.
The organization started up before that, but the festival was founded in 2000, and the organization actually got its start in 1998. As a composer, I wanted to find an outlet for my music and to promote music of my friends and others that thought were doing some really interesting work. So the organization started as just a bunch of composers got together that were sort of like-minded. And you know what this is, Galina? It's really kind of a story about a nonprofit organization. So many businesses are for-profit,
Mhm.
but I found in my adventures, my business adventures, if you will, that there's not enough information for nonprofit people to get a foothold and understand the business. And as you said, I'm a composer. That's my training. I got my bachelor's degree and a minor in philosophy in composition from the University of Michigan. And then I got my master's from Michigan. And then I did my doctorate and I decided this academia is not for me. And I wanted to move to New York City and see what I could do just in music that way with my own music. And that's kind of how this got started. But it's a story about making a nonprofit work, I think, at least from my standpoint, which is different from a for-profit business, but not really. I don't know if that answers your question. But
Yeah, well, let's start with the name of a festival.
the name of the festival is the Tribeca Music Festival. It was started in New York City. The organization that I was in at the time wasn't called the Tribeca Music Festival, it was called the New York Art Ensemble. And Jim Simpson at the Flea Theater downtown, he and his wife Sigourney Weaver had this wonderful little theater called the Flea Theater. Jim was looking for programming and he sent one of his people to listen to one of our concerts. They loved it, and he gave me a call. He was interested in having us do some programming at the Flea, and that was a kind of a breakthrough moment for us because up to that point we've just been just a bunch of no-name composers trying to put concerts together. So I said, sure, we'd be happy to do a concert at the Flea. And he paused and he said, how would you like to do 6 concerts at the Flea? That was a huge revelation to us that someone would be interested and trust what we were doing enough to get behind us, both financially and artistically, to create something. And so we sat down and we thought, what should we call this? I guess we're going to make it a festival or something like that. And we didn't, was it a series, is it a festival? What is it? And what are we going to call it? Well, where are we? Well, we're in Tribeca. And we thought, oh, shit, that's a great name. Tribeca's a great name. So we'll
Yeah.
call it the Tribeca New Music Festival. And that's how it got started. It's been a wonderful experience. We've been growing from there.
This is great. So you took the role of a founder, obviously, with some other
Yeah,
of your friends who were also composers.
that's exactly right.
Does it mean that you're still playing in the theater or you since expanded?
What we found, I mean, when this can go back to before the Tribeca Music Festival, we were just a bunch of composers together. And through word of mouth, it started to grow, get reviews in the New York Times. And that's how Jim found out about us. Through word of mouth, and then finally through some great press, people started to get onto what we were doing. We built it from there. Does that answer your question?
Kind of.
You were asking me about expanding. When we started at the Flea, that went really well. After about 6 years down there, we just ran out of space and we needed
Okay.
a bigger space. And so that's when we moved up to the Abraham Kaufman Music Center in Merkin and started doing programming there. That's a very expensive venue. It was very successful, but we weren't making enough money to keep doing it there. So then we just started moving around the city to different venues. which was great. We went to the Galapagos Art Place, and then we went to Nancy Manachurian's theater in Chelsea, who was one of our patrons from the get-go. We found people to help support our work and opportunities to grow it. And now we're at the Domena Center for Classical Music here in New York City, and we're also going to be doing programming again back at the Coffin Center. They want us back after these years. It's been an interesting ride.
And I think it's very interesting that even though I do want to definitely talk about difference between nonprofit and for-profit, but if you start looking at the journey of this venture, essentially similar things happening no matter whether the company's registered this way or another. For example, you outgrew one venue, you moved to another one, that one didn't work out, so you had to pivot and you found basically kind of completely different model. Instead of staying in one location and being connected to one location, you found a way to leverage other locations, and basically you keep your costs down and you get invited instead of vice versa. So it's very
Yeah.
interesting. The parallels are also similar.
Well, look, I mean, Broadway's a interesting example as well. When you think about Broadway plays and musicals that are going on, there are for-profit and not-for-profit productions.
I
And
did not know that. There are
yeah, the
Broadway
line,
non-for-profit productions.
that's right. And the line between the two is very gray, and there are a lot of people with lots of different opinions about how it could be done. That's just the reality of Broadway. And for us, in a way, we've always stayed on the nonprofit side because that gives us funding opportunities that we couldn't have as a for-profit venture. For example, we get some audience revenue money, but the lion's share of our money comes from donors and patrons, from foundations, and to some extent government money from the city and the state. In a way, you could think those are our real customers in terms
Mm.
of financially, right?
Mhm.
But we also have a community we serve. That's another set of customers, and those are the artistic ones that come to our show. So that's kind of how that breaks down. But for us, it was always like any business, what's the best deal? What's the best bang for the buck we can get? If we have the content, and that's very important to have content that will bring in lots of butts and seats, we'll go to a bigger venue. It's just boom, we'll just do it. We work with so many emerging artists. They're not household names. Nobody have ever heard of them. And so we'll go to a smaller venue to feature them and help get their foot in the door as artists. A nonprofit organization is really, it's just a charity. We're a charity. And our mission or our mandate from the federal government is to serve the public. And that's what we do. We are bringing music to the public sphere that would not ever get there without our help. And that's sort of what we do at our core.
Can I ask you, has it been really hard to manage it as a nonprofit? I know there's a lot of paperwork involved, a lot more than a regular business. Has that been a challenging for you?
Yeah, it's because for artists are the worst. We grow up steeped in making the best art we can, and nobody teaches us about business. I think that's a real hurdle for many artists who are trying to get their work supported and they want to figure out how to take the next step. And if you've never had any business training, that's a very difficult thing. So I coming straight out of college with only music training, I had to sort of figure it all out. Now, fortunately for me, I come from an entrepreneurial family. My father was in business for himself. His father was in business. So I grew up around an environment where having your own business and running it was an everyday thing. So I understood that part of it. And so it wasn't that difficult for me to know immediately what had to be done in terms of a commitment and knowledge of sales and marketing and all these kinds of things that nobody talks about when you get your music degree. So that helped me a lot when I arrived in New York City.
Let's play this scenario. Let's pretend that you, or maybe you when you were younger and wanted to start a venture as a creative entrepreneur, and you have only 30 days and you have almost no money, almost no resources per se, the ones that you used to have in right now. Like, how would you approach this challenge?
Okay, well, that's a great question. This is a not that different from what it would be if you were doing a for-profit company, but
Mhm.
you have to figure out what the hell it is you want to do. You have to define it. You have to be very specific about it. You need to research it to understand it. You may have a very clear idea right off the bat for a product or for an idea for an organization or whatever. But you need to get that nailed down first. You can't sell what you don't have, right? So the first thing I would do is I would get the ideas together, talk to people. Along the way, I'd be talking to possible patrons. When you're young and you're out of college, that's going to be family and friends that know you, teachers, people who know you and might support you in some way. And that's kind of how we did it originally. Like I said, a word of mouth campaign. So that's what I would do. The first thing I would do is figure out what the hell you want to do and run it by people, which will help strengthen your idea. Then once you do that, start executing it on a small scale. Now, again, I'm talking about a nonprofit arts organization. If you've got a software widget you want to put together or an app or something like that, that's different. But in a way, it's actually very similar. You still have to sell people on the idea. One of the things that I had trouble with so many of the artists that I was working with initially, they would have the attitude, well, I'm not selling myself, I don't want to sell myself to do this. We shouldn't think in terms of, I said, you're selling yourself to me right now in terms of you as a player. You have to be aware of what selling means. When you go into a job interview, you're selling yourself. You're making the sale about your qualifications and so forth. So same thing with starting a new thing. If you just land fresh onto the ground into an environment, you got to look around, see what's possible, come up with an idea, and then get people behind it.
Can I ask you, after your initial circle, obviously parents, friends, and stuff, how would you try to approach other people who never heard about you or your festival idea or whatever other idea you come up? How would you do that?
Well, I don't particularly subscribe to the cold call idea. I
Mhm.
think you need to network it. One thing that I think nonprofits have to understand is their board of directors is very important to the growth of an organization. And if you don't even have a 501(c)(3), which is a nonprofit organization, if you don't have that, you still have a circle of friends that you're working with. That's how we started out. So you talk to your friends, you get together, you have meetings. How are we going to spread the word? Well, I know this person, I know that person. Well, let's go after those people. That's how you do it.
How does it work? How would you approach, even right now, how do you approach patrons? You just basically give them PowerPoint presentation? How does it work?
Well, one of the traditional sort of saws or sayings, the nonprofit world, and I like this, you have suspects, prospects, and patrons. So
Hmm.
you start off by defining, again, who are the suspects? And what we did literally, we sat down together in a room and said, well, who do we know that we think might be interested in supporting what we do? Those are our suspects. And then the next
Hmm.
step is you say, let's get those suspects to a concert. We'll comp them, we'll give them free tickets, we'll schmooze them to get them to come. And if they like it and they express that, now they're a prospect.
Hmm.
So then you keep working with them, you make a personal connection with them, and then at a certain point you hit them up for donation, and that can be done in different ways. But that is, in a nutshell,
That
uh,
turns them into patrons.
that's right.
Got
That's
it.
right.
So it's a
Pyramid.
three-step ladder: suspects, prospects,
Exactly right.
patrons.
That's right. And that's the same can be said for fundraising and for foundations and agencies. For example, we get money from the New York State Cultural Fairs. That's a city organization. We
Right.
get funding from the New York State Council on the Arts. That's a state organization.
How does
And
this work? How does working with the city, if somebody would want to seek funding from the government, from the city, how would they approach that?
so you can go to their websites, and they're very good about supporting the arts. And they'll have an application. It's something I recommend. I think the more you know about it, the better. I would contact DCA, Department of Cultural Affairs. I would contact NISCA. In my case, there's a music division for both of these organizations. You talk to them, make a phone call, an email, find out what they think you would need to do to apply for an application. And those applications are online, anybody can access them. But the thing is, and this is the important hurdle, I think, for us, is that you have to be a 501(c)(3). You have to be a federal charity, a nonprofit organization. If you're not, you're not going to get any money.
You got to register first.
That forces, you can imagine how that forces so many artists into business. You're making a corporation. You have to get a law firm that's going to help you become a New York State corporation. And until you can do that, none of those funding opportunities are there. And that's why that was That was a big hurdle for us. It took us several years to get through that process, but we did it by hook or crook. And that's a turning point.
Can I ask you, do you have to apply every year basically to the city, or is
Yep.
it every year venture you got to go through this
It's
thing?
very competitive. Yes. And I think the longest grant we ever got was maybe 5 years or something like that, which is
Okay.
kind of a coup, but usually it's 1 to 2 years.
You have to
And
apply
that's
every
because
time.
they're trying to keep it fresh. They're trying to keep it fresh too and give other people opportunities. So your tax dollars do actually help fund organizations. And let me tell you something, the state and the city realize how important nonprofit arts organizations to the tourist business in New York State, and especially in New York City. We're treated with great respect by both the city and the state because they realize how many people we bring into the city that help make businesses thrive here. I think there's a great history with how the arts affinities and business schools, I mean, people, if you have a small town and you want to make something out of it, if you bring in the arts, then parents will start thinking, well, gosh, maybe I do want to have my kids around the arts. And if they can get educated and stuff like that, arts is a big magnet, and it happened to us. I was living in the Lower East Side back in the 80s, which is basically a shooting gallery for junkies. It was terrible. But there were some arts galleries and concerts started to happen in that area, and it got more popular for the cool people to go to. And suddenly, back in the day, Mayor Koch got interested and decided to clean up the neighborhood, and the whole thing took off from there. But it started with the arts. That's my soapbox pitch for the arts.
It's great. And actually, for people who are not involved in creative business, who are not into arts, it's actually really hard to wrap your head around like how it can be helpful. It's just how the brains are wired. I think there are two types of people,
Yeah.
practical and creative.
It's a family thing. I mean, mothers and fathers, the first thing they want to do, not the first thing, but one of the things they want to do is they want little Mary to have piano lessons or go
Right.
to concerts or little Jimmy to learn how to play the violin or a cello or something like that. And that's just part of their education, right? The arts really do play a role. And so many times it's misunderstood. People think, oh, well, they're glomming off of, big money someplace or my tax dollars or whatever. And nothing could be further from the truth. It really nourishes communities and attracts people to the communities to want to live there and work there.
Yeah, it's not all about a hustle culture. Everybody say you got to serve the need. Sometimes people think that the need is only food, shelter, something you're in pain. But there's also other needs that people have, which is psychological and something that would make you feel better emotionally, not so much physically. So, and that's what you're saying. Arts provide essentially what I was also noticing, that even if it's art and it's nonprofit, once you start digging in, there's still underlying things why people give money in city in particular. So city sees that there is a long game, like you said. If there is going to be festivals, there's going to be arts, people's going to be coming to the city. And also when people come into the city, more money come into the city, the neighborhoods gets nicer. So essentially, I think sounds like it's important to understand if somebody wants to pursue it and start asking for funding from the government agencies, it's to sell it to them in a matter why that would be good for them. That might be a little hard for somebody, like you said, people in arts to sell, but essentially they will have to phrase it the way that clicks in business people in the city.
Well, I think business people are the hardest ones to convince because they're more oriented towards bean counters and profit and loss. The agencies, like the state and the city, they get it.
Mm.
The money's there. They don't need to be convinced that this is important. What they need to be convinced is that you're going to do a good job.
How do you do that? How do
Well,
you prove them that you are the man for the job?
it's kind of an onerous process, but you have to describe what it is you're doing, the effect you've had. Nonprofits have a different kind of metrics. We have financial metrics where we look at a profit and loss sheet, our expenses and revenue. But we also have to think in terms of our effect on the public. We have an audience count. We do things like we count the number of standing ovations artists get.
Oh, how interesting.
We
STEM
we we
innovations.
we do things that show a different kind of effect metrics, if you will, that we can talk about to these agencies and foundations. And I want to emphasize that agencies are governments institutions, and foundations are private institutions, or they could be public, but they tend to be commercial corporate foundations, and many times they're family foundations, people with a lot of money that want to support the arts. So those are harder because they're not as consistent, but the foundations are harder in that regard. But agencies like the city and state, they understand because they see the bottom line to what happens when the arts are funded properly in their communities. And they realize how important it is for a city, the bang for the buck, what they give to us versus what tourists spend when they come to the city and support city life here. That's a great deal for these agencies. So they don't need to be convinced that we're important. What they need to be convinced of is that you can do the job
Hmm.
and that you're doing something that's effective.
And you do that by showing your metrics on what you've done. Your
Yes.
metric is standing
We
ovation
show
is
we
one of
show our
them.
metrics, we tell our story, we give them work examples. Both the city and the state have panels with made up of your peers, other artists and
Hmm.
musicians. If it's photography, other photographers will be looking at your work. If it's musicians, if it's for music, other composers and performers will be looking at your application. I just got a email actually 2 days ago from the New York State Council on the Arts asking me to be on a panel to review other
Is
grants.
that unpaid job or do they pay you for it? I'm just
They pay.
curious.
They pay. Not a lot.
City. Mm.
Yeah, it's a, how should we call it? It's an honorarium.
Hmm.
And I realized that it's good for me to participate because I get to see the other side, how
Are you
they're
gonna
thinking.
accept?
Absolutely.
I'm
Yeah.
looking forward for the update.
I mean, there are people on your side. There are
Mm.
people that you just have to find them. That's the key thing.
This is great. And I also wanted to ask you, I'm sure there've been some downsides to for 24 years I've been doing. I wanted to see what do you think was the lowest point at which you thought, I don't want to do this anymore, and how do you pick yourself up and continue doing it?
Well, that's a great question. And I think the best way to put this is when you start an organization, and as I mentioned earlier, that I came into it with not really very much business experience running a nonprofit corporation, but I did have the advantage of understanding what it is to make a business work to a certain extent because I grew up around it. But we had a board of people, and a lot of people didn't understand that. They were just basically purely artists. They would get involved with business decisions and people would be questioning each other. And before you knew it, nothing was happening. We were just at loggerheads. You depend on someone to do something and they disagree, and then nothing happens. This is very common. I kind of made a point of studying this and talking with some educators in this field and advisors. So, long story short, is that at a certain point back in the early 2000s, we sort of came to loggerheads where nothing was happening. A year went by, and I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm in this because I have such a passion for it. So I'm going to go to the next board meeting. I'm going to go and I'm going to say, I have a plan to get us out of this funk and move us forward. And it's going to involve A, B, C, D, and E. And it's going to involve you guys making me the president and CEO of this organization. So I
Mhm.
basically take over. And the board approved it. So that left other people feeling really bad, really nasty about it and upset. And it left the majority of the board very excited about moving forward. And that's what we did. So that was a tough time. I'm talking about you're working with your friends. And it's one thing to have artistic friends, it's another thing to put those same people into a business situation. And therein lies the rub. So that's the difficult part. That's the, how should we say, the growing up part, if you will, of making an idea into an actual entity. Those were tough times.
Sounds like they were looking for just someone to lead them. They
Yeah, I
just
think
needed one voice.
Yeah, when you have artists and patrons in your patrons want to move this thing forward. And the artists, if they're disagreeing with how to move it forward, that's where you run into a problem. We have artists and patrons as well. I think ultimately the board wanted to see this organization thrive. They love what was going on. And they knew it was going to step on some toes. They voted to move forward, and that's what we did. Some people quit the board, and most of them stayed. That's not uncommon to for-profit boards as well. Businesses have that all the time. What famously comes to mind is ChatGPT and AI and Elon Musk and Sam, what's his name, who's the CEO of Chat. I
Sam
mean,
Altman.
yeah. Musk was on the board for a while and funded them. He wanted them to stay a nonprofit and Sam wanted to take them into the profit world, and that's where the whole thing kind of blew up. My point is that it can happen at a very low level like us or at a very high level like those guys with billions of dollars thrown around.
Got it. I now wanted to talk about, I remember last time when you and I talked, you were considering selling the festival, but now I think something changed. Can you give me a little bit of tell us on that one?
Initially, I thought I loved what we were doing, and I wasn't quite sure how I could step down and get out of the way and quote retire. I also considered just closing the doors and saying, "Look, I've done my part. I've made it had a great effect on the new music community here in New York City, and I can be proud of that, and that's that." But many of the people that were working for me said, "No, no, no, we got to keep this going because we really like what's happening." So we went through different kinds of ideas about how we could continue this. And I was interested in trying to figure out how to resolve this issue because I know that people wanted it to continue. I ended up talking to another organization that loves what we do, and we're going to partner with them. I'm going to continue on as a curating director, artistic director. That means I don't have to do the grunt work anymore, and it's fine with me because I love the work. Like I said, I think earlier, it's my baby and I love it and I'll do it until I can't do it anymore. I do want to turn the reins over to a younger generation, and that's what we'll be doing.
So the two nonprofits going to be joining basically.
That's right. We're going to put a partnership together, and it's like any other business. We're testing the waters. We want to see how we work together. Our cultures are so similar that I think it'll be fine. And I'm not going to make any announcements about who we're partnering with just yet because we still
Okay.
have lots of things to go through. And this agreement just came together last month. We won't be making any big announcements until the fall. But I'm excited that we seem to have a path forward. It's changed since the last time I saw you. So it's a dynamic situation.
Well, I hope it works out because I totally get it when you say it's your baby and you've been together with the business for longer than with some people probably in your life. 24 years
Yeah.
is a long time. It would be great to see it continuing in some form or another.
Yeah, the Tribeca Music Festival has been a really important element in New York City. We have the festival. We also have a young composer competition, which is a national competition, which is actually older than the festival. It's a couple years older than the festival. That's been really great for young composers across the country where we play their music here in New York City. It gives a huge spotlight and a career boost. And also we have our YouTube channel, which has an archive of all this wonderful music. So it's also where we do YouTube premieres as well. These are our three sort of main products, if you will, the festival, the competition, and the YouTube archive. And it's been very effective. I'm very proud of it. And I'm glad that we've been able to impact so many lives.
I really appreciate you sharing. I hope this episode is going to be helpful to creative entrepreneurs so they can see that there are different ways how to make sure that they continue doing what they love and not starve to death. And there's also different options. There is nonprofit way and there is a for-profit way. And there are different ways how you can get funding to keep your idea going. I think it was a really good insight into how it works in the creative arts and entrepreneurship. Thank you so much for sharing. And before I let you go, if you want to say how people can find you, if you want to learn more about you or your festival, I will link in the festival, but maybe you want to share some more resources.
Sure. Well, you can go to our website. That's the first thing I would recommend, tribecanamusic.org. It's very simple. Also, you can go to YouTube and put in the search bar Tribeca Music. I think all one word in that case. That'll take you to our YouTube channel. And from our website, you can learn about all the other activities we have going on. We've got a couple concerts coming up this summer. We have a full fall schedule coming up. So there's a lot of cool things going on. We have the competition at the end of the year for young composers across the country. There's really a lot of activities happening. I would just say go to tribecanamusic.org and it'll take you from there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. It was so great talking to you.
Thank you, Galina. It's really great meeting you a few weeks ago and talking with you today. It's really been fun.